What's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jen Woodhouse and these are my beautiful new DIY nightstands. Want to build one for your own home? Keep watching and I'll show you how we did it. Okay, so let's talk about these nightstands. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I've been on a French design kick lately, which is what inspired the design of these nightstands. Technically, they would be considered more of a Gustavian style, which is a little less fussy, understated interpretation of the French Louis XVI style. These fluted and beaded details were prevalent in French neoclassicist and Gustavian design, and I'm so excited I was able to make my very own beaded drawer fronts. This is beautiful white oak hardwood, by the way. Big thanks to 84 Lumber for sponsoring this project. It's been a ton of fun partnering with them. You might remember when we teamed up on our kids' built-in bunk bed project last year. Well, 84 Lumber is a family and woman-owned business, and growing up as an Air Force kid and now as an Army wife, I love that they support our military through veteran career-building opportunities, military charities, and appreciation events. I was able to source this gorgeous white oak hardwood from them. They can get you just about any species of wood, and there are over 250 stores across the US, so I'll leave a link to their website in the description box below so you can find the 84 Lumber store nearest you. As always, you can download the plans from my website, also linked below, and I even mapped out the recommended plywood cut layout, which considers the direction of the wood grain and how these separate components will fit together. You should be able to get 2 nightstands out of a single sheet of 4 by 8 foot plywood. Just cut the plywood right in half before you start making cuts for each individual nightstand. For these rough cuts, I like to use a handheld circular saw and a foam insulation board. I use the insulation board as a cutting mat. I just drop it on the workshop floor and lay the plywood sheet right on top. The foam supports the entire sheet of plywood and protects my saw and the workshop floor. I can cut on it over and over. It's lightweight, inexpensive, easy to manage, and easy to store. Also, I like using a plywood blade, which helps reduce the risk of tear out. A 48-inch piece of plywood is much easier to maneuver on the table saw than a full 8-foot sheet. Set the fence to 16 inches and rip the plywood for the shelf piece. Now, if you're going to be making 2 nightstands, keep in mind you'll want to repeat the steps before moving forward, changing the fence setting so that both nightstands will have identical parts. Then you could take the pieces to the miter saw and cross-cut them to length, or you can use a cross-cut sled on the table saw. All of these details are in the plan, so be sure to snag that PDF download from jenwoodhouse.com. I'll also link my favorite miter saw blade down below. The cut is super clean. Also, if you find this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You can hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And I would love to hear from you. Leave me a note or any questions that you might have in the comment section. So this was the first time I've ever worked with white oak. I'm used to building with pine, spruce, maple, poplar, and black walnut, so I assumed that working with white oak would be the same. It's not. This was definitely a learning experience for me, and it was pretty challenging, to be honest. I mean, the white oak is so beautiful, which is why I chose to use it for this project. I didn't want to have to stain the wood to get it to the right color. I just wanted the natural wood tones to shine through. So for that, I'm really glad that I chose white oak, but this new experience also meant there are new challenges that I had to overcome. The wood fibers of white oak are very dense and close-grained, so it's super hard, which makes it strong, but it's also less forgiving than softer woods like pine or spruce. With softer woods, the wood fibers are a lot more flexible and sort of move out of the way when you're driving a screw into it, whereas white oak is more rigid and unmovable. Almost every time I drove a screw in, the wood would split, even when I pre-drilled pilot holes, which was super frustrating because then I had to stop, repair the damage, clamp, glue, and wait before moving forward. And because the grain is so tight, it's pretty impervious to water and moisture, which meant that the glue up was a little more challenging as well because the glue isn't able to deeply penetrate into the wood fibers to make that bond. So if you're gonna work with white oak, just know that it might require a bit more finesse and a lot more patience. Just take your time and give yourself some mercy. You're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay. That just means that you have the opportunity to learn. Next, I cut the 2x2 boards to length according to the cut list. I drilled 3/4 inch pocket holes along the edges of the plywood panels and 1.5 inch pocket holes into the 2x2 rails. Then I constructed the side panels with the plywood flush to the interior sides of the frame. I also love it when my husband Adam can help me in the shop. He's great at lifting all of the heavy stuff and clamping things. He's my man clamp. Next, we built the bottom panel. 3/4 inch pocket holes drilled into the plywood and attached to the 2x2 bottom rails with 1.25 inch pocket screws and wood glue. The bottom panel should be flush to the top of the rail so that there is no lip. Then we're gonna build the carcass by attaching the bottom panel to the side panels, then square up and strengthen the whole structure by adding the top rails. To attach the top, I laid a blanket down to protect the plywood, then flipped it over with the good face down. Then I flipped the carcass upside down on top of the plywood and positioned it so that there was an equal overhang on all sides. I pre-drilled and countersunk pilot holes and attached the top with wood screws. To hide the raw plywood edges, you can use this edge veneer banding. It has a heat-activated adhesive, and you just iron it on and trim off the excess. I actually just made my own edge banding by ripping thin strips of my white oak cutoffs on the table saw. Then I just glued and pin nailed the trim to the edges. With the nightstand still flipped over, I attached the fixed shelf with pocket holes. I love this little shelf so that I can keep the top of the nightstand free and clear of any clutter. This is also a great place to tuck your laptop, tablet, bedtime reading, or whatever, and it would be even cooler to keep a hidden power source here to charge electronic devices. In hindsight, I would have attached this shelf as one of the last steps so that I had more access as I was installing the drawers, so I revised the plans to reflect that change. Drill 3/4 inch pocket holes into the left and right edges of the plywood, and then attach the shelf with pocket screws and wood glue. It's helpful to cut a piece of scrap wood to serve as a spacer to hold the shelf as you're attaching it. Now it's drawer building time. I talk about this in more detail in my cabinet building video, so you can reference that if you're interested. For these drawers, I chose to make a floating bottom where the bottom panel slides into a groove that I've cut. You can make this groove with a couple of passes on the table saw or use the router table using a 1/4 inch straight bit. Notice where we're drilling the pocket holes on the front and back drawer part so that the sides are in the outside position so that as you push and pull the drawer, you have a stronger joint that will be able to withstand daily use. The front and side parts of the drawer should be 3.5 inches wide, but the back part should be ripped to 2 3/4 inches wide, and I'll show you why in a sec. Once all of the drawer parts are cut out, here's how I assembled it. First, I drilled 3/4 inch pocket holes into the front and back parts. Drill the pocket holes on the outside of these parts so that you don't see them inside the drawers. Also, be mindful of where you place the pocket holes so that they don't run into the grooves. Build the drawer box with pocket screws and wood glue, and then check for square by measuring the diagonals. These measurements should match, and if they don't, squeeze the longer measurements together until the two measurements are the same, and then you can clamp and then let the glue set. Alright, so here's why the drawer backs are narrower than the front and sides. It's a pain in the butt to try and get all four sides to line up into the grooves when you're constructing the drawer box, but if the back part is narrower, it'll actually sit above the groove. So now we can attach the three sides, then slide the bottom panel into the grooves, and then glue and staple the bottom panel to the back piece. Easy peasy. Standard metal drawer slides typically require a 1/2 inch clearance on each side, which means you'll be building the drawer box 1 inch narrower. It's important to first measure the space that the drawer will be going into and then build the drawer box accordingly. When I screwed on the slides, I made sure to place them 3/4 inch back to leave space for the drawer face. These drawers are inset drawers, so that means the drawer face will be flush to the surface of the cabinet and not sticking out past it. I really wanted a beaded profile on the drawer fronts, and I racked my brain to figure out how to best achieve this look. first, I considered gluing a bunch of half-round dowels to the drawer face, but all I could find was pine, and covering up this gorgeous and expensive white oak with pine doesn't make much sense, so that was a dead end. And then I found that they actually make double and triple bead and flute router bits, but because I wanted the beads to run across the grain instead of alongside it, these router bits just wouldn't work. I finally found this router bit, and I'll link it below, so now I'm able to pop this bit in the palm router and then create this beaded profile in any direction I want. This is totally doable by hand, but it'll take a ton of time and effort, so I decided to let my CNC do the heavy lifting here. I mean, if there's ever a choice where there's a robot involved, you choose the robot. I know most people may not have access to a CNC, so again, you can use a palm router to do this, or even use a router table, but just know that it'll be more labor intensive and time consuming. Of course, you can forego this beaded detail altogether and still have a beautiful piece of furniture. Finally, I added the 1/4-inch back panel with staples and wood glue, and then I screwed on the metal brackets and added the legs. And voila! Beautiful DIY Gustavian-inspired nightstands. I love the contrast of the natural wood tones with our black iron bed, and I made it so that it's pretty spacious and tall to match the height of our bed. It's so beautiful and exactly the look that I was going for. So let me know what you think. Are you a fan of this Gustavian style? If you build this project, I would love to see it. Be sure to tag me at Jen Woodhouse on social media, or you can even share your work directly on my website. Just click the Share Our Project link. And if you've made it this far in the video, congratulations, you're getting a history lesson. Gustavian style is named after Swedish King Gustav III in the late 1700s, who was a Francophile. He was heavily influenced by French design after visiting the Palace of Versailles, where his good friend and ally, King Louis XVI, lived. During this time, French design was moving away from the ornate, opulent Baroque and Rococo periods and into neoclassicism, which was more about clean, classic lines and symmetry. It's a counter-response to the excess and grandeur of the Rococo period. Moldings were thinner and more elegant, fluted and beaded molding were prevalent. It's less ornate, yet still formal. It's opulence with restraint, which feels both modern and traditional. And here's another little nugget of information for you. King Gustav was the first neutral head of state to recognize the United States as they fought for their independence from Great Britain. King Gus was a big fan of Benjamin Franklin, and to this day, the Swedish are still proud of the fact that they were the first to willingly offer up their friendship to the Americans. All that to say, I love that French neoclassicism and Gustavian style is still prevalent today, almost 250 years later, which is a testament to timeless design. Thanks again to our sponsor, 84 Lumber, and thank you for watching. I'm Jen Woodhouse, and I will see you in the next video.